Now, these numbers are extraordinary because they reveal not just what America suffered, but the details of the damaged aircraft paint a difficult picture for the American military. Here's what the losses include. 4 F-15E Strike Eagle fighter jets. Remember, 3 F-15Es were destroyed by friendly fire over Kuwait. This happened within the initial days of the war. The 4th F-15E was destroyed inside Iran, where both aircrew ejected separately, leading to an intense search and rescue operation as well, involving hundreds of troops and fighter jets. 1 A-10 Thunderbolt II ground attack aircraft. This was damaged during the search and rescue operation to recover an U.S. airman who was stuck in Iran. 2 MC-130J Commando II. Now, these were intentionally destroyed by American forces on the ground in Iran during a rescue operation after they were unable to depart. Next up is 1 HH-60W Jolly Green II helicopter. Sustained damage from small arms fire inside Iran. Then there was 1 F-35A Lightning II stealth fighter jet, which was damaged by Iranian ground fire, making it the first case of the unkillable F-35 stealth jet that was being locked and hit. 24 MQ-9 Reaper drones. They have been lost since the start of the war against Iran. Then you've got 7 KC-135 Stratotanker aerial refueling aircraft. 2 of them were damaged in friendly airspace, while 5 were damaged while on the ground at the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, which is, remember, a critical American military hub. 1 E-3 Sentry AWACS, or the Airborne Early Warning and Control System aircraft, was damaged while being parked on an unprotected taxiway at a critical U.S. military hub in Saudi Arabia. Then you've got 1 MQ-4C Triton high-altitude long-endurance drone, which crashed to the ground. Now, these were the basic numbers and types, but to understand the scale of this, let me give you the context. The F-35A, for instance, is America's premier 5th-generation stealth fighter. Losing even one in combat is strategically and politically significant. The aircraft costs roughly $80 to $100 million, depending on configuration and support package. The E-3 Sentry AWACS, for instance, is another, even more critical aerial ammunition. It's essentially a flying command center coordinating air battles, tracking missile launches, and managing battlefield awareness. Now, these aircraft are rare and they're expensive, with replacement costs running into hundreds of millions of dollars. Then there are the drones. The report claims that the United States lost 24 MQ-9 Reaper drones. These are the workhorses of modern American surveillance and precision strike warfare. Each MQ-9 costs roughly between $16 and $30 million, depending on equipment. Now, if you combine these two, the estimated losses and repair costs reportedly push the overall financial burden of the operation close to $29 billion. And mind you, not just militarily, America has struggled through financial burden as well. On the 12th of May, remember, during a hearing of the House Appropriations Subcommittee, Acting Pentagon Comptroller Jules W. Hurst III testified that the department's cost estimate for military operations in Iran has increased to $29 billion US. But even after this, I say the point is not just how many aircraft were lost. The real question is, what does this reveal about Iran's air defense capabilities? Remember, for decades, the United States built its military doctrine around the assumption of air superiority. From Iraq in 1991 to Kosovo, Libya, Syria, and more recently Afghanistan, the U.S. Air Force has always operated with an overwhelming dominance of the skies. But this now seems to be changing. Multiple reports have suggested that Iran relied on a layered defense strategy. Mobile surface-to-air missile systems, radar networks, drone swarms, electronic warfare, and manpads, or short-range shoulder-fired missiles. Now, if you remember, on the 3rd of April, an American F-15E Strike Eagle was reportedly shot down over Iran. The crew ejected, leading to the massive search and rescue operation by American forces deep inside Iranian territory, and days and many difficulties later, the 2 pilots were rescued. Now, this entire incident points to something deeper. This war is exposing vulnerabilities in American logistics. There are also growing questions about transparency. Several reports, remember, note that the CRS compiled information from the Pentagon statements, CENTCOM releases, media reportage, and battlefield assessments, but also warned that the numbers could still change due to classification restrictions, incomplete battle damage assessments, and the ongoing combat operations. And this matters because historically, wartime casualty and equipment loss figures are often revised months or years later. Governments sometimes underreport losses during active wars, something that the Trump administration has been accused of as well. But it leads us to the big question, staring down at the United States. Did Donald Trump overestimate America's military stance in Operation Epic Fury? The world remains on an edge, with U.S. President Donald Trump threatening the resumption of the Iran war. However, remember, he's now facing a fierce pushback from two world powers. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin joined hands in Beijing to call out all acts of unilateral bullying and strengthen their comprehensive partnership. Now, these two visuals that you see on your screen depict a story. Just 5 days ago, a different person sat across the chair with Xi Jinping. Just like Putin, he received a grand welcome as well outside Beijing's Great Hall of People with a 21-gun salute and military band playing the national anthems of the two countries. However, the difference in outcomes has been stark. While no agreement was signed between Trump and Xi, China and Russia signed 40 agreements, signaling the significance of their bilateral ties. In fact, in a strong indirect signal to Donald Trump, Chinese President Xi Jinping told his Russian counterpart that the world faces the risk of regressing to the law of the jungle. He also warned of unilateral and hegemonic countercurrents running rampant in the world. Listen in.
Unilateralism and hegemony pose grave dangers, and the world faces the risk of regressing to the law of the jungle. As permanent members of the UN Security Council, China and Russia must resolutely fulfill our responsibilities as major powers, uphold the authority of the United Nations and international fairness and justice, and oppose all acts of unilateral bullying and attempts to reverse the course of history.
Now, as part of their joint declaration on the emergence of a multipolar world, China and Russia stressed that the U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran seriously undermine stability in West Asia. They also opposed Trump's Golden Dome project for increasing the risk of combat in space and transforming it into an arena of armed confrontation. According to them, this proposed missile interceptor system posed a threat to global strategic stability. And this is not all. Remember, both countries also called out the U.S. for its irresponsible policy in not renewing the START treaty. During Putin's bilateral visit, both sides agreed to enter their 25-year friendship treaty and signed a slew of agreements covering areas like trade, technology, media, and global governance. In fact, they also highlighted how bilateral trade has climbed by 20% from January till April, exceeding $200 billion for the third consecutive year. While Trump did not get any assurance from Xi as far as his stance on Hormuz is concerned, Iran featured high in the talks with Putin. Xi told his Russian counterpart that West Asia was at a critical juncture and called for a comprehensive ceasefire. Xi Jinping said that resuming hostilities is inadvisable. On his part, meanwhile, Vladimir Putin assured China of uninterrupted supplies of oil, gas, and coal. He also agreed to promote China's Belt and Road Initiative to form a greater Eurasian partnership. Listen in.
Today's talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping were highly productive and useful. a substantial package of documents was signed, including joint statements by the two heads of state outlining our shared positions and areas of cooperation across virtually all key sectors. Together with President Xi, we set new ambitious goals for advancing Russian-Chinese cooperation.
Now, the bonhomie between Putin and Xi was clearly on display throughout this visit. For instance, they toured an exhibition of large frame photographs dedicated to their past meetings. Remember that they have met more than 40 times, signifying their close ties. Both leaders also held informal talks over tea before Putin's visit drew to a close. Now, Donald Trump had a rather interesting take on Putin's China visit. While remaining silent on the outcomes of their respective visits, the American president sought to highlight how his China visit was much more grand in scale. Take a listen.
What do you make of President Xi meeting with Putin this week?
Well, he told me he was going to. I think it's good. I get along with both of them, but I think it's good. I don't know if the ceremony is quite as brilliant as mine. I watched. I think we topped them.
Well, the visit also raised some key questions. While Donald Trump claims that Xi Jinping backed him on not sending arms to Iran, will this assurance hold, given the fragility of the ceasefire that we've seen in the past few weeks? Also, with Putin repeatedly offering to take in Iran's enriched uranium, can Russia prove to be the icebreaker in the West Asia impasse? With China and Russia reinforcing their ties at this critical juncture, it is, of course, apparent that Donald Trump is on a back foot. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has concluded the final leg of his five-nation diplomatic tour with a visit to Rome, where India and Italy not only reaffirmed their growing strategic partnership, but they also sent a strong message about their shared vision for global connectivity, trade, technology, and economic cooperation, particularly in the India-Middle East economic corridor. In fact, it also had the now very viral Melody Toffee video by the two leaders. We'll talk about it in just a bit, but let's give out the details of what exactly happened during the visit. Prime Minister Modi held extensive talks with the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, with both leaders addressing a joint press conference and describing the India-Italy relations as entering a new phase of strategic cooperation.
इंडिया ईयू एफटीए के समापन में इटली से मिले सहयोग के लिए मैं प्राइम मिनिस्टर मेलोनी का विशेष रूप से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। हम मिलकर इसके जल्द से जल्द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के लिए काम करेंगे, जिससे बिजनेस कम्युनिटीज इसका पूरा लाभ उठा सके। फ्रेंड्स, टेक्नोलॉजी और इनोवेशन हमारी पार्टनरशिप का इंजन है। एआई, क्वांटम, स्पेस और सिविल न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी जैसे क्षेत्रों में हमारे सहयोग की अपार संभावनाएं हैं।
Today here in Rome, we are further strengthening our relation all the way up to the special strategic partnership, the highest ever reached in the relations between our two nations. So I think it's safe to say that now Italy and India are closer than they have ever been. Our relations are now capable of expressing their fullest potential.
Well, both leaders also published a joint op-ed across multiple international news platforms. They laid out an expanded roadmap for the India-Italy cooperation against the backdrop of an emerging economic corridor. At the heart of this vision is the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or the IMEC, which both countries described as a transformative project designed to redefine connectivity between Asia, the Gulf region, and Europe. Now, this IMEC project, remember, was first announced on the sidelines of the G20 summit in New Delhi in September of 2023, and it is now being positioned as one of the most ambitious global connectivity initiatives of the decade. India and Italy have said that they are committed to working with international partners to turn this massive economic and infrastructure vision into a reality. The India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor is essentially a massive transnational connectivity project which is designed to link India, West Asia and Europe through a modern multimodal transport network. The project was officially launched during the 2023 G20 summit to create a faster, more efficient and more secure trade route between the three regions. The entire corridor is expected to span around 6,400 kilometers and will be divided into two major routes, the East Corridor and the Northern Corridor. Now, IMEC is not just about moving goods. It's also about building the digital energy and economic networks of the future. The project plans to include undersea and land-based digital cables that will significantly boost data connectivity between India, West Asia and Europe. The IMEC initiative, remember, brings together India, the United States, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, France, Germany, Italy and the European Union together. But even as high-level diplomacy and global connectivity dominated this visit, it was a light-hearted moment between Prime Minister Modi and the Italian Prime Minister that ended up literally breaking the internet today. During his visit, PM Modi presented Giorgia Meloni with a packet of Parle's popular Melody toffee. Soon, it went down as a playful nod to the viral hashtag Melody trend that combines the names Modi and Meloni. In fact, the Italian Prime Minister later shared the video of the moment on social media where both leaders could be seen smiling and holding the toffee packet.
Prime Minister Modi brought as a gift a very, very good toffee.
Melody.
Now, this hashtag Melody trend itself first exploded during the COP28 summit in Dubai in 2023 when Giorgia Meloni had posted a selfie with Prime Minister Modi captioned, "Good friends at COP28, hashtag Melody." This hashtag quickly turned into a massive online phenomena and has remained popular ever since. After the video went viral, shares of Parle Industries hit the 5% upper circuit as well. However, there was one little important twist. Parle Industries actually has no connection to Melody Toffees or to Parle products. The Melody brand is actually owned by the Parle Products, which is the Mumbai-based FMCG giant. Moving on, anger over America's war with Iran is now spilling into the heart of Washington. Questions are growing over U.S. President Donald Trump's strategy, and the political backlash inside America appears to be intensifying further. During a heated U.S. House Armed Services Committee hearing, Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton clashed with the Central Command Commander, Admiral Brad Cooper, over the human cost of this war. Here's a look at the exchange.
I would like to know how many more Americans we have to ask to die for this mistake. Do you know? I think it's an entirely inappropriate statement from you, sir. With all due respect. With all due respect. It's not a statement. It's a
Remember, this hearing took place just after Donald Trump said that he had paused planned military operations against Iran at the request of the Gulf allies of America, who wanted diplomatic talks with Tehran to continue. At least 14 U.S. service members have died in combat since the United States launched Operation Epic Fury on the 28th of February. Moulton, who's a Marine Corps Iraq war veteran and known to be a sharp critic of the Trump administration's Iran policy, accused the U.S. government of failing to control the escalating consequences of the Iran war. He raised concerns over the instability in the Strait of Hormuz, the soaring energy prices, and reports claiming that Iran had rebuilt parts of its missile network. Admiral Cooper rejected all of these claims and insisted that American forces had met their military objectives. In fact, he also dismissed reports about Iran restoring key missile sites as, quote, inaccurate. A ranking Democrat on the committee further pressed Cooper for information on the Minab school bombing in March that killed more than 165 people, including school children. Cooper said that the bombing is still under investigation.
It's a complex investigation. The school itself is located on an active IRGC cruise missile base.
Absolutely.
It's more complex than the average strike. As soon as we're complete, I'm fully committed to transparency, given your important oversight role and the other members here.
Iranian Foreign Ministry slammed the claim by the U.S. Central Command that the Minab Girls' School was situated on a cruise missile base and called it, quote, a baseless fabrication and an appalling lie. The anger regarding the Iran war is also growing within the American public. A New York Times Siena poll shows that most voters believe that Trump made a wrong decision to go to war against Iran. Only 30% think Trump's decision to go to war with Iran was the right decision, while the majority says that the war is not worth the cost, with only 31% of Americans approving how Trump has been handling this entire war. With that, let's tell you what is coming up on the other side of Gravitas. India has added another feather to her cap as the DRDO successfully completes the development trials of the unmanned aerial vehicle ULPGM-V3. What is it? We tell you all about it. And northern India almost feels like a furnace that is grappling with a severe heat wave. Health and business concerns add to the people's woes. India has taken another major step towards strengthening her indigenous defense capabilities. India's Defense Research and Development Organization, or the DRDO, has successfully completed the development trials of the unmanned aerial vehicle-launched precision-guided missile, also known as the ULPGM-V3. The successful testing marks a significant boost for India's growing drone warfare and precision strike program. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh described this achievement as a strategic milestone in India's journey towards self-reliance in defense manufacturing. The trials underline New Delhi's push to reduce dependence on imported weapon systems and strengthen domestic military technology. The missile underwent testing in both air-to-ground and air-to-air combat configurations at a DRDO test facility near Kurnool in Andhra Pradesh. During these trials, the system demonstrated its ability to strike a wide range of targets, including tanks, helicopters, drones, and other aerial threats. Officials said that the missile operated through an advanced integrated ground control system. The system managed launch operations, command functions, and real-time mission control during the tests. DRDO designed the platform with automated launch and readiness technologies to improve the response time during combat situations. The ULPGM-V3 has been specifically built for launch from unmanned aerial vehicles, commonly known as drones. In practical battlefield terms, the weapon gives drones the capability to carry out precision strikes against the enemy armor on the ground while also engaging hostile airborne targets. The air-to-ground version of this missile focuses on anti-tank warfare and battlefield strike operations, while the air-to-air configuration allows drones to neutralize hostile UAVs, helicopters, and low-flying aerial threats. Now remember, this dual-role capability significantly expands the operational flexibility of India's drone fleet. The successful trials come at a time when militaries across the world are rapidly shifting towards drone-centric warfare. Wars in West Asia and Eastern Europe have demonstrated how unmanned systems can essentially change the balance on the battlefield through surveillance, rapid targeting, and precision strikes. India now appears determined to integrate similar capabilities into its own military doctrine. Strategically, this development could provide India with a critical battlefield advantage in future conflicts. Armed drones equipped with precision-guided missiles can strike enemy positions without risking pilot lives. Such systems can also operate in difficult terrain and hostile environments where conventional aircraft may face greater vulnerability. Remember, by deploying armed drones that are capable of intercepting hostile aerial platforms, India could create a more layered and flexible air defense network along sensitive borders. And another major strategic advantage lies in the cost efficiency of it and the rapid deployment. Drone-launched missiles are often cheaper to operate as compared to the traditional fighter aircraft missions. This allows armed forces to sustain longer operations. The development also carries geopolitical and industrial importance. According to the government, the Indian defense firms and MSMEs have played a key role in building this missile system. Officials stated that the successful trials confirm that the domestic supply chain is now prepared for serial production. This not only strengthens India's defense manufacturing ecosystem, but remember, it also opens the possibility of future exports in the growing global drone weapons market. Well, let's talk about the rupee now. The Indian rupee hit a record low of 96.96 against the US dollar, crossing its previous all-time low of 96.61, later closing at 96.82. The currency has weakened by more than 6% since the Iran war in late February. The sharp fall comes as stalled US-Iran peace talks continue to keep global crude oil prices elevated. The Indian rupee's record low could soon show up in the monthly budgets of ordinary Indians through costlier fuel, more expensive gadgets, higher foreign travel bills, and rising prices of daily essentials. While the impact may not be immediate, a prolonged weakness in the rupee has the potential to make life more expensive for households across the country, for you and I across the country. Rising oil prices have also pushed up global bond yields and increased fears of further interest rate hikes by central banks worldwide. For India, the biggest concern is oil. The country imports more than 85% of its crude oil needs. With crude prices climbing above $100 per barrel, Indian oil companies need more dollars to pay for imports. That increases the demand for the US currency and puts additional pressure on the rupee. A weaker rupee may not hurt consumers overnight, but the impact can gradually spread across household budgets. Imported products such as smartphones, laptops, cameras, and gaming consoles could become more expensive because remember, companies have to spend more rupees to buy the goods priced in dollars. Foreign travel is also likely to pinch harder. Indians traveling abroad could end up paying more for hotels, shopping, food, and entertainment. Families funding education overseas could feel the pressure as well as tuition fee, rent, and living expenses rise in rupee terms. But the biggest long-term risk is inflation. If crude oil prices remain high and the rupee stays weak, fuel prices in India could actually come under pressure. Costlier fuel often pushes up transportation and logistics expenses, making our groceries, our food delivery, and daily essentials more expensive. Several industries, including aviation, automobiles, chemicals, and electronics, may face rising costs as well because, remember, they rely heavily on imported components. However, not everyone loses when the rupee weakens. Export-driven sectors such as IT services and pharmaceuticals can benefit because their dollar earnings convert into more rupees. Indians receiving money from relatives abroad may also gain, as every dollar remitted brings in higher value back home. All right, shifting our focus now, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will visit India from the 23rd till the 26th of May. This is, remember, his first official visit to the country. During his visit, he will hold talks with senior Indian officials on energy, security, trade, defense, and strategic cooperation. According to the U.S. State Department, Marco Rubio will visit Kolkata, Agra, Jaipur, and of course, New Delhi. He's also expected to attend the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting in Delhi on the 26th of May, along with representatives from India, Australia, and Japan. The U.S. Embassy here in India has said that Marco Rubio will take part in high-level engagements and events marking 250 years of America's independence. In fact, the American Embassy also released a video message by Marco Rubio about his four-day visit to India, where he hailed the partnership between the world's oldest and largest democracies.
As America gets ready to celebrate our 250th birthday, we look forward to doing it with our partners in India. India is the world's largest democracy, and we are the world's oldest. So we look forward to celebrating together.
Now, the visit comes amid efforts by India and the United States of America to boost bilateral ties after recent trade tensions. Earlier, America had imposed high tariffs on India and increased the costs for H-1B visa applications as well. However, both sides later agreed to move forward on a trade deal, leading to the removal of the tariffs. India and the United States are now working toward finalizing the trade agreement, with an Indian delegation expected to visit America in the coming weeks. The upcoming visit was earlier disclosed by the U.S. Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, who said that the United States was looking forward to finalizing important agreements during Marco Rubio's trip. Before arriving in India, Rubio will attend NATO-related talks in Sweden. The discussions there are expected to focus on defense, spending, security cooperation, and burden sharing within the NATO alliance. This will also be Rubio's first visit to India, remember, since President Donald Trump returned to office, underlining the strategic importance that both countries continue to place on their partnership. A major shift may be unfolding inside the Western military alliance as Washington signals plans to reduce the number of American forces available to NATO during future crises. Alarm bells are now ringing across Europe's defense establishment. Remember, for decades, Europe relied on American military muscle. Now, the continent is being forced to rethink its own battlefield readiness. Take a look.
Behind closed doors, the questions are growing sharper. How many American troops could leave Europe? How quickly could NATO respond during a future crisis? And is Europe prepared if Washington scales back military commitments further? The US is reportedly preparing plans to shrink the forces it would place under NATO command during emergencies and major military confrontations. The US is pulling out 5,000 troops from Germany. This came after a spat between President Donald Trump and Chancellor Friedrich Merz over the war in Iran.
What we're basically saying is, as the European pillar of the alliance gets stronger, this allows the U.S. to reduce its presence in Europe and limit itself to providing only those critical capabilities that allies cannot yet provide. And so we should expect there to be a redeployment of U.S. forces over time as allies build their capacity.
Poland is also alarmed by reports that Pentagon has cancelled plans to deploy 4,000 US troops in the country. US tried to reassure Poles that this is not the case. The proposal has left European allies on tenterhooks. For decades, American troops form the backbone of NATO's rapid military response capability across Europe. US soldiers, air power, logistics, networks and missile defense systems have long served as the alliance's most powerful conventional deterrent. Now uncertainty is spreading through European capitals. The US currently has around 76,000 troops across NATO territory, the largest volume since the Cold War, European governments are now accelerating defense spending, expanding weapons production, and strengthening regional military coordination. NATO's top leaders are insisting that any future US troops withdrawal would not undermine Europe's collective defense structure.
NATO is and will always be a transatlantic alliance. Part of keeping this alliance strong involves shifting responsibilities, moving away from unhealthy over-reliance on one ally to a fairer sharing of the responsibility for our collective security.
Despite the public statements about transatlantic unity, Europe is uneasy about Washington's broader strategic intentions. Increasingly, NATO allies are realizing they can no longer depend on the US for their security and will have to shoulder far greater responsibility themselves. But do they have the men, the machines, and the money to do so? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The UK has softened Russian oil sanctions as fears grow over fuel shortages and rising energy prices. The Starmer government has decided to ease part of its restrictions on Russian oil products. Britain has now allowed diesel and jet fuel made from Russian crude oil to enter the UK, but it comes with a caveat. The oil is first refined in another country before being imported into Britain. Now remember, this move comes at a time when global energy markets are under intense pressure. The ongoing conflict in West Asia, especially with the disrupted Hormuz, has created fears of tighter oil supplies, higher energy prices, and possible shortages of critical fuels such as diesel and aviation fuel particularly. British authorities are now especially worried about the possibility of jet fuel shortages during the busy summer travel season when air traffic demand typically surges across Europe. Officials have issued a special license that will allow these imports to continue indefinitely. Although the government says that the policy will be reviewed periodically by the business secretary and could be modified or even withdrawn in the future if necessary, UK's decision, remember, marks a sharp contrast to its earlier position. In October last year, Britain had introduced a strict ban on the import of oil products made from Russian crude. This ban was effective even if those products were refined in third countries. That policy was part of a broader Western effort to cut off revenue streams to the Kremlin amid Russia's war with Ukraine. The aim was essentially to ensure that Russian oil could not indirectly find its way into British markets through countries such as India or Turkey, which have now become major buyers and refiners of discounted Russian crude. The new exemption effectively opens a breach in that sanctions wall. Because under these new rules, diesel and jet fuel derived from Russian crude can now legally enter Britain if the refining process takes place outside of Russia. This is important because, remember, Russia continues to export large volumes of crude oil to countries including India, Turkey, and other major refining hubs. Those countries then process the crude into finished products such as diesel, petrol, and aviation fuel, which are subsequently re-exported to international markets under the label of the refining country rather than Russia. But despite the relaxation of rules for diesel and jet fuel, other products made from Russian crude remain banned in the UK. Petrochemicals, heating oil, and certain other refined products are still covered by sanctions restrictions. The government appears to have made a deliberate decision to focus the exemption on fuels considered most critical to the economy and transport infrastructure. Now, ironically, the global energy turmoil has benefited Russia in certain ways, although Moscow has been forced to sell much of its crude at discounted rates. Higher global oil prices mean that Russian exports still generate massive revenues. Now, as long as countries continue buying Russian crude and refining it elsewhere, Kremlin maintains access to a critical source of income that can support government spending as well as military operations. But London is not alone in reassessing its sanctions policy. Washington, interestingly, has been moving toward a more flexible approach as well in response to the rising energy concerns. On Monday this week, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced yet another extension of a sanctions waiver that allows the purchase of Russian oil transported by sea. Earlier this year, the Trump administration had introduced a temporary 30-day waiver for Indian refiners, allowing them to continue buying Russian crude despite the sanctions pressure. UK's decision highlights a growing dilemma for Western governments. On the one hand, they want to maintain economic pressure on Russia and continue supporting Ukraine. On the other hand, they must also ensure stable energy supplies, avoid sharp increases in fuel costs, and protect their own economies from further financial stress. Thousands of lives have been ruined after being robbed of their hard-earned money. Why am I saying this? Well, fake romantic relationships, exciting investment deals, orchestrated from scam compounds in Southeast Asia have all become a global menace. And now, a U.S. report has linked China to all of this. The Select Committee on China in the U.S. House of Representatives has released a report detailing its investigation into the scam center network operating in many nations, including Cambodia and Myanmar. Rather than directly alleging any state-backed conspiracy, it blames Chinese governance and enforcement patterns for enabling growth of these very criminal networks. Take the case of billionaire businessman Chen Zi, who was extradited from Cambodia to Beijing in January this year for his involvement in operating scam compounds. The report claims that a Chinese intelligence officer was formally placed within Chen's Prince Group, as it was called, to achieve China's strategic aims in Cambodia. It also identified a pattern where China takes action against scam-linked accused only after they become diplomatically costly. In terms of material losses, the numbers have been quite revealing. As per this report, Americans lose $10 billion annually to cyber fraud from scam compounds. Quoting Interpol, it has cited that illicit proceeds from scam centers worth nearly $3 trillion move through global financial systems every year. There is a larger human cost as well that is involved here. The report flags how scam centers rely on human trafficking, drawing victims from over 80 countries. Now, as per the U.S. committee, victims have reported being subjected to physical and sexual violence and threats of resale to meet scam performance quotas. These persons face a dual jeopardy. While they are exploited as victims, they are coerced to defraud a second set of victims as well. So what has the committee proposed to tackle this big menace? It has pitched certain recommendations to ensure that scam ecosystems face higher costs, fewer safe havens, and stronger financial pressure. It has called for a bipartisan legislation on to create an interagency task force for targeting transnational scam syndicates operating large-scale scam compounds fueled by human trafficking. The report also advocated sanctions on foreign officials and business elites linked to the scam operations. Besides this, it has urged the American government to counter influence of China in vulnerable Southeast Asian nations by strengthening governance institutions. At the same time, it has backed tactical law enforcement cooperation with China. This report, remember, comes just a month after Cambodia passed a landmark legislation mandating punishment of 2 to 10 years in prison and fines of up to $250,000 for those who've been convicted in online scams. On the other hand, United States has announced criminal charges against 2 Chinese nationals in April this year for operating scam compounds. Amid this, calls are now growing for more effective action to ensure relief for those who've been trapped in these hellholes and for millions of vulnerable people across the world. All right, shifting our focus now, it seems diseases that were thought to have vanished are now returning. Such is the case in Australia. The country is facing its biggest diphtheria outbreak in decades. A disease many believed had been wiped out by vaccines has now completely gone haywire. Authorities say that more than 220 cases have already been reported in 2026, with infections now confirmed in northern, western and southern Australia. The outbreak began in remote communities in the Northern Territory, but genomic tracing has linked cases across borders, particularly into Western Australia's Kimberley region and parts of Queensland. The Northern Territory has 133 cases, Western Australia has 79, South Australia is at 6, while Queensland has 5 cases. That takes the national tally to roughly around 223 infections, which is, remember, an unprecedented spike for a disease that normally records fewer than a dozen cases a year in Australia. But what's even more alarming is that authorities are now investigating what could be Australia's first diphtheria-related death in nearly a decade. The suspected fatality was reported in a remote Northern Territory community. Medical experts say that several factors are driving this resurgence. One major concern is falling vaccination rates after the COVID-19 pandemic. Australia's childhood immunization coverage has dropped below the ideal herd immunity levels, and many adults have missed their booster doses. The country's health minister, Mark Butler, has called the outbreak serious and possibly the worst that Australia has seen in decades. Medical experts warn that immunity against diphtheria fades over time, which means that booster shots are critical, not just childhood vaccinations. Doctors stress that vaccination remains the best defense. All right, moving on. In a laboratory filled with incubators and artificial shells, scientists may have just crossed a frontier once confined to science fiction. For the first time, researchers have successfully hatched live chicks from fully artificial eggs. The breakthrough is now fueling conversations about the future of endangered species and even the possibility of bringing extinct birds back to life. Our next report gets you all the details.
Science fiction has crossed the threshold into absolute reality inside a high-tech laboratory. Biologists have achieved the impossible by successfully hatching live, healthy animals from completely synthetic eggs. This monumental milestone effectively opens the door to bringing long-lost extinct species back from the dead.
The egg works by re-engineering what nature did so well in its design to create a system under which the developing embryo can get all of the nutrients, gas exchange that it needs to develop, while also being re-engineered for science so that we can observe all the steps of development and also intervene with editing if we ever need to.
According to Colossal Biosciences, 26 baby chickens ranging from a few days to several months old were born from a 3D printed lattice structure that mimics an eggshell. For scientists, this was more than a laboratory experiment. It was proof that avian development may one day be possible outside natural eggs entirely. Researchers believe the technology could eventually support conservation programs for critically endangered bird species whose populations are collapsing in the wild. Artificial eggs may also help scientists study fragile embryos without disturbing natural nests.
It might be interesting from a from a kind of general kind of scientific research perspective. But as I said, you know, these methods have been a long time coming, and I do think that we probably best focusing our funds on trying to preserve species that we already know that we need to protect now.
Scientists stress that such goals remain highly experimental and filled with technical and ethical challenges. No extinct bird is being brought back today. Still, the symbolism is powerful. For modern science, it may mark the beginning of an entirely new chapter in biological engineering.
All right, shifting our focus now, Cristiano Ronaldo is all set to feature in a record 6th FIFA World Cup. The 41-year-old will lead Portugal's 27-man squad that features several big names and includes an honorary tribute to the late Diogo Jota as well. Now, Ronaldo is the all-time leading men's international goal scorer with 143 goals, and he holds the record for the most international appearances as well. The 5-time Ballon d'Or winner has in fact lifted almost every major trophy in football. But the FIFA World Cup remains missing from his collection, and this could be, well, his final attempt to lift it. This will also be Ronaldo's first World Cup since leaving the European club football. The Portuguese star, who now plays for Al Nassr in the Saudi Pro League, has enjoyed another strong season, scoring 28 goals in 36 matches so far. Ronaldo, remember, is also just one win away from claiming his first major trophy since moving to Saudi Arabia. A boost that could prove vital for both Portugal as well as their captain, after the side was stunned in the quarterfinals at the last World Cup in Qatar.
When we talk about Cristiano Ronaldo, there are two players. The icon of world football, about who all fans around the world have an opinion and acknowledge what he brings to football. And then the player, our captain. Our captain is held to the same standards as the other players. He has the competitiveness needed to be in the national team, and for me, the captain is exemplary. He was very important in winning the Nations League. And now we want to continue with the same level of responsibility and example inside the dressing room.
Ronaldo features alongside Manchester City trio of Ruben Dias, Bernardo Silva and Matheus Nunes. Manchester United captain Bruno Fernandes and Paris Saint-Germain troika of Vinicius, João Neves and Nuno Mendes. Portugal head coach Roberto Martinez has also named 4 goalkeepers in the squad. All right, here's wishing Cristiano Ronaldo all the very best for his 6th World Cup. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
breaking news.
And raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is one.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
In this rapidly changing world, is your health keeping pace? Best practices and breakthroughs busting the hype with real insights. The timeless power of yoga and ancient healing. Good food, good mood. Small steps, big impact. Your health matters. Only on WION World is One. Because nothing matters more.
In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter. Because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world. A 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION World is One.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. This is WION World is One. We are glad you're watching American Joker. The headlines. President Donald Trump says we may or may not have to hit Iran harder, asserts it is up to Iran if it wants to sign a deal or not. Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf says the U.S. is seeking to restart the war and hopes the Islamic Republic will surrender. Went on to say that the U.S. and Iran are caught in a war of wills. The British Defence Ministry releases footage that claims to show Russian jets flying close to an RAF Rivet joint aircraft. 2 Russian jets repeatedly and dangerously intercepted a British surveillance aircraft over the Black Sea last month.